hopefully we will, as bad as this sounds, experience what it must have felt like to leave him in the grave and walk away. And the disciples then stood behind closed doors in fear. And it may be uncomfortable, but the point to that is you probably then, if you are a lover of Jesus, can't wait to get here on Sunday morning. And you'll come ready to celebrate his resurrection. So Friday at 6 o'clock here in the sanctuary, we'll have a Good Friday service. And then on Easter, right after the service in here on Easter morning, we'll have a potluck, and you can see Irene if you don't know what to bring or need some suggestions. So for those of you who are new here, Irene, would you stand up, please? Okay, you can find her in the nursery. For liturgical churches, this week is celebrated as Holy Week. And although we don't really practice that in the fashion that they do, I do, before we get to Matthew chapter 26, just want to remind you of all that has happened the week before the Passover meal that we're going to see in just a moment. Matthew chapter 21, he comes riding in on a donkey into Jerusalem. Now, the first thing you need to understand is, why is he coming riding in on a donkey? Well, if I were going to go attack Moscow, I'd go riding in a tank. If I were going to enter into a city that I'd conquered, I would go in chariots and in power and might. But when I come to my own capital, I ride in on a donkey. This is my home. These are my people. Jesus is not conquering them. He's coming into rightly what is his. He is the Son of David, the Messiah, the Christ, and the city of Jerusalem has been given to him by the Father's never-ending covenant to David. Even by Jacob leaning on his staff and speaking about the scepter never leaving the hands of Judah until it comes to that to whom it belongs. This is Jesus' rightful home. So Jesus is not coming in leading a rebellion, but the religious rulers are leading a rebellion against him. Does everybody understand that? And so when he arrives in Jerusalem, they're expecting him to come and throw out the Romans, and instead of going to the Antonia fortress to throw the Romans out with 12 legions of angels, instead of throwing the Gentiles out, he goes to the temple and he throws out the corrupt Jewish leaders. Right there, that should have got their attention. And it did. They just didn't bend the knee. They challenge his authority. By what authority do you do this? And he says, what authority did John have? Where did it come from? They know the answer. Heaven. That's where my authority comes from. And you are rebelling against God himself right now. And then he goes out and curses the fig tree. And it represents that old covenant that could never bring righteousness to anyone. The only thing it could do was condemn. That old law. And it could cover the sins until the final Passover lamb would be presented. He tells a parable about two sons. You got the prodigal son, and what he's saying to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, the leaders. He's not saying this to the Jews. You can't say, well, he's condemning all Jews. He's condemning those in power of the Jewish nation because they are crooked and corrupt shepherds. He says of the prodigal son, look, the taxes and the tax collectors and prostitutes are coming in, and you guys are standing out. He tells about a prodigal son. Those sinners that they condemn, Jesus receives in and kisses the wayward son's neck. But the older brother stands outside and won't come into the festival. He's telling that parable against the scribes, the Pharisees, the priesthood. And then he goes on to tell the parable about the vineyard, and this one got them. The father or the man had a vineyard, and he rented it out to some folks. He put it in their hands. They were supposed to produce what he had expected, but they wouldn't. And he sent messengers, and they beat the messengers. And then he sent his son, and they killed the son. And Jesus asked the scribes and Pharisees, and the Sadducees, the priesthood, he says, what would the owner of the vineyard do? And they said, the owner of that vineyard would kill those wretches and give the vineyard to somebody else. And he says, and that's exactly what's happening. Jerusalem and Israel is being taken out of your stewardship and going to be given to some who will produce fruit. It's not talking about Gentiles there. The apostles suddenly are going to stand at the temple in just a few days and preach the good news of the gospel, and the gates of the kingdom of God are going to be thrown open wide, and the lost are going to come flooding in thousands. And the apostles will become the teachers of those people rather than the scribes and the Pharisees. And so we saw in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, that the apostles stand there in the temple and they teach every day, and the people devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Already the kingdom was being taken away. And then he gives a parable about a wedding feast. I invited them. I invited you, Pharisees. I invited you, Sadducees. I invited you, priests, to the wedding feast, to the feast of the Messiah. But you wouldn't come in because you were too busy. So look at who I have brought. Look at Mary Magdalene. Look at the prostitutes. Look at the tax collectors. Look at the sinners who have come to salvation and are following me everywhere. They're at the wedding feast, and you're left out. But there was one found at the wedding feast. He was there, but he didn't have the right garments, and there is Judas Iscariot, traveling along with Jesus everywhere, but never for a moment having accepted Jesus as his Lord, just traveling along with him for whatever dollars he can pick up along the way. He tells that parable. Chapter 23, then, he speaks 7 horrendous woes to those in power, to the Pharisees, to the scribes and the Sadducees. He curses them. And it culminates in this word that he says to them. He says, you guys say that if you had been there when Jeremiah was here, if you'd have been there when the prophets came, you would have never killed them. Your ancestors killed them. And you're saying you would have never killed them. So here's what I'm going to do to this generation. To you scribes and you Pharisees and you Sadducees, I'm going to send my prophets to you. And you're going to kill them to prove that you are just as guilty as your parents. And then here's what's going to happen to your generation, to you, your generation, all of you in charge. The judgment that was due for every prophet that has been killed from the time of Abel, I'm going to put on your account, and I'm going to punish you for all of them. Here's what he says in Matthew 25, verses 35 through 36. So that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. They weren't even alive then, but he's just saying, I'm putting it all on you. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. He says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Remember, this is his home. He rode in on a donkey. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets. Now, El Paso is known for a lot of things, but we're not labeled with that. Portland is labeled with a lot of things, but not that label. LA is labeled. Las Vegas is labeled Sin City. But they're not labeled this. You who kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings? You were not willing. Now here is the death knell. He quotes from Zechariah the prophet. Ezekiel the prophet. In Ezekiel's visions, when God's taking Ezekiel and saying, Son of man, do you see this? Son of man, do you see this? Son of man, and he takes him into the temple and he says, do you see this? And he says, because of this, their house is left desolate, and the voice of God leaving out of the gate goes, and then Babylon comes. Here's what Jesus says to them. See, your house is left desolate. My house will be a house of prayer. Your house is a den of thieves and robbers. This temple is not my house. This temple, my people, this is my house. This body, this temple, destroy this, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He's saying, I'm leaving now, and you're done. It's over. I don't know that there can be a more terrifying judgment than God just simply says, goodbye. How close are you to that? What's terrifying is many of us have loved ones that are just that close to God just saying, your will be done. I think of my brother. How many times will he reject Christ until God says, it's finished, done, your will be done? I have hope for him because he's still drawing breath. That means God's not done yet, doesn't it? So with all of that being said, let's look now at Matthew chapter 26. Let's just read verses 1 through 5. Turn in your Bibles, Matthew 26, verses 1 through 5. When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciple, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. And then the chief priest and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people. Here's a couple of things that jump out at me right now. And let me just take you to it. It's not comfortable, but let's just go there for a moment. Can you imagine him saying, in 2 days, I'm going to suffer the most torturous death mankind has ever devised? And saying it nonchalantly like that? How do you feel when you know you have a dental appointment? He's facing crucifixion, and he says, he's told them many times, I'm going to die, I'm going to be killed, I'm going to die for many. But now he says, in 2 days, he tells them how he's going to die. I am going to be stretched out on a cross after having a cat of nine tails taken to my back. And I'm going to slowly suffocate in my own blood and fluids in my lungs. And I will be lifting myself up on my feet, trying to get a breath of air so that I can say, God forgive them. And he says it as if you and I are going to Albertsons when stuff's on sale. Who does that? And then what about us? He said, you may be brought before the justices. And you may be asked whether or not you're mine. And your life, and many saints before us, this happened to them. Your life will be forfeit. You'll be cut in half. You'll be burned alive at a stake. You'll face the wild animals in the Colosseum. You'll be tortured. You'll be imprisoned in dungeons until you just die there. He says that to us. How do we get what he had? Because, friends, it's closing in. You very well might need this soon. How do we get such composure and such courage to face that brutality? Do you have it right now? If you imagine right now that they've arrested you, and as has happened to so many before us, and then they bring your grandchild out in front of you and begin torturing him until you deny Christ. Could you stand? Where does he get this? And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because it's coming. And we need to be prepared before it arrives. And it's a terrifying thing because there's some verses that speak about our judgment if we don't stand in that horrible moment. Matthew chapter 10:33 says, "But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven." That's a horrifying verse to me. 2 Timothy 2:11 and 12. This saying is trustworthy, for if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he also will deny us. I'm motivated right now because I know that I'm in trouble. I'm afraid. I'm afraid I won't stand. And then this is my destiny? I didn't write these verses. But what do you do with them? Let's see if we can find some answers for us. In fact, let me just let you off the hook. The answers are here. You're going to be okay. You're going to be all right. Matthew chapter 26 continues, verse 6 through 13. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In the pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Now Mary, this is Mary. We know from the other Gospels, particularly the Gospel of John, that this is Mary, sister of Lazarus. There's another event that happens with a woman washing his feet with her tears. That was a prostitute, or probably a prostitute. This is Mary, the sister of Lazarus, whose brother has just been raised from the dead and restored to her a few days before, and Jesus has restored her faith. I don't think she knows what she's doing. Women were allowed even to carry these flasks even even on the Sabbath. It was such a they kept it around their necks. This was such wealth, and in worship for what he has done, for who he is to her, she comes in and breaks the most precious thing that she has open and pours on him. Now, she doesn't know what she's doing, but what she has just done would be the equivalent of us going and buying a coffin for a loved one before they die. How much does a coffin cost? 10 grand. Or perhaps paying for the whole funeral. That's how Jesus takes this. She just paid for my funeral. Now, she didn't know that, and they didn't know that. But he's saying, that's why he's saying, you've always got the poor, but when somebody dies, you've got to have a funeral. She's just done that. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and says, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him. I would like you to notice that he has already made the plan. This is before the Passover. He's already made the plan. He's already collected the money. What is going on in Judas Iscariot's mind here? Well, the Bible tells us that he was always a thief and that he used to steal money out of their purse. So now, let's put the pieces together. Jesus says, "I'm going to die in 2 days." And instead of this money going into the purse where I could have skimmed off of the top. I could have got several $1,000s. It's just been poured on the ground. He says he's going to die in 2 days. I better unhitch my wagon right now and cash in and collect what I can. I need to change teams. The fact of the matter is, I think that if you left Judas to his own devices, he was following Jesus that whole time saying, well, if this is the son of David and he ends up on the crown, with the crown, I'm going to end up being on the cabinet. Maybe he'll make me the minister of finance. And then if I play my cards right, I'll probably be able to get him assassinated and take his place. He was a thief the entire time. He didn't become a thief on this day. He was stealing the whole time. He had been practicing for this. Little at a time, getting better and better at it, and now he cashes in with enough money to buy a whole field. How much money would it cost to buy a field? 10,000? Pick up verse 17. Before we go on, I guess I should say, just kind of spoiler alert, Judas betrays him. He's got 12 of them. Judas betrays him. 10 of them desert him, and 1 denies him. What's left? Judas betrays him, 10 deserts him, and 1 denies him. Everyone fell. Everyone. And he knows it ahead of time. Now let's continue. Verse 17. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus. Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover? He said, go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. Now in Matthew's account here, it appears that Jesus has had a private conversation with somebody in the city. Somebody had an upper room, and Jesus said, you know, when I give you the word, I'm going to need that upper room. When I give you the word, I'm going to need it. Will you save that for me? During Passover week, when everybody is renting out their rooms, will you save that for me? And then he gives the sign, the time is at hand. Could you imagine if this guy's, dude, I already rented it out. I am so sorry. But you were going to die anyway. It's not like I'm going to get repeat business off of you. See, that's how Judas would have handled this. But no, this man held it for him. He says, my time is at hand. What time? Well, I'm going to die. And before I die, I want to share this meal in love with my betrayers, my deserters, and my denier. When you put the Gospels together, what you have is this. Those 12 men sat there. All will either betray, desert, or deny. What do we do with deserters in the military? And he gathers those deserters at the table and shows the full extent of his love, John 13 says, by washing all 12 of their feet, even Judas. He has the Passover meal even with Judas. He institutes the Lord's Supper and has the bread, which is his body, symbolizes his body, and the cup, which symbolizes his blood in the new covenant, and Judas drank from it, and Peter drank from it, and the others did too. And every one of them is going to fall away. Verse 20 picks up, when it was evening, he reclined at the table with the 12. And as they were eating, he said, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord? I think here's the beginning of wisdom. Do you notice I said that I'm afraid that I will fall? I think perhaps the beginning of wisdom is to say this: how could I possibly stand? Lord, let's just start here. Lord, will I stand on that day? You know, I don't. I think the worst mistake you could make is go, well, no matter what anybody else does, I'm sure that I'll make it. One after another, one by one, I wonder if they came around to him and whispered, is it I? Jesus, please, don't tell me it's me. He answered, he who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Judas, who would betray him, answered, is it I, Rabbi? And he said to him, you have said so. I want you to notice the difference in the question. John says, Lord, is it me? Thomas says, Lord, oh my God, Lord, is it me? James says, Lord, is it me? And Judas says, Teacher, is it me? You see, Jesus was never his Lord. To Judas, he's just a teacher. There are many people right now today, all over the United States of America, who will declare to you, Jesus is a great teacher, and if all of us would follow his teaching, this would be a much better world. And they'll even tell the church, you know, you've got a great teacher. If you'll start obeying all of the red letters in the Bible, we'll have a much better land. Even Muhammad believed that Jesus was a great teacher. But what's at issue is not what you think about his teaching. What is at issue is he your Lord? Meaning, is he your commander? Do you do what he says? That's the difference between Lord and teacher. See, you can come to church and you can say, I'm a Christian, but the question is he your commander? Are you his servant? Does he get to tell you where to go to school? Does he get to tell you where to live? Does he get to tell you what to do with your time? Does he get to tell you what to do with your money? Or is he just a teacher that if I hook my wagon to him like Judas, I can have some money coming in and some comfort, and at any time I can unhook and cash him in? The Bible says it's not enough just confessing him as teacher. It's not enough even to confess that he's the Son of God. That's not enough. It's not enough to confess that his death on the cross was good for your salvation. That's not enough. The Bible says in Romans chapter 10, verse 8 and 10, but what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, but with the mouth one confesses and is saved. Jesus says of David, how could David say to his Lord, my Lord? Because even to David, Jesus Christ was his Lord. Is he yours? See, the difference between betrayal and denial or desertion, and there is a huge difference, it's an issue of money. Woe to the one who will only call him Rabbi. It would be worse you had never heard his name than you confess he's a good teacher, but I will not have him as my king. It would be better you were never born. Woe to the one who will preach for money. That's betrayal. I'm just trying to get another airplane, some gold faucets on my doghouse, and so I preach the name of Jesus. That's betrayal. It would be better that pastor had never been born. Woe to the one who only wants to be with Jesus because of a promise of prosperity. That's betrayal. They're already guilty. Judas already cashed in. They're already guilty as betrayers. The story continues in verse 26. Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many in the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's house." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out the Mount of Olives. Now, particularly in the book of Luke, it tells me that Judas was there during this time. In John, it says that after Jesus has told him that he's the betrayer, he tells him to go and do what he went to do. And so he does not go to the Mount of Olives with them, but he was there for the institution of the Lord's Supper. Also, we know from the book of John that Jesus knew one of them was not really of his flock. See, Judas was not of Jesus' flock. He was a goat that traveled along, looked like a sheep, but he was never a sheep. 1 John 2:19 says this, "They went out from us, but they were not of us, for if they had been of us, they would have continued with us, but they went out that it might become plain that they all are not of us." Right now in this sanctuary, I dare say with this many people here, there's a goat or two. I love you. If you're a goat, I love you. And you can become a new creature before you go home today. Jesus washed Judas's feet. Jesus gave him communion. And Jesus died on the cross for Judas. And at any time, he could have come to Jesus and confessed him as Lord and repented of his sins, and he would have become one of the flock. I want you to be careful when you take communion. If you're a goat, you may want to hesitate. Matthew chapter 26 continues in verse 31 through 35. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised, I will go before you to Galilee." All of you are going to desert me. I'll meet you in Galilee. What? You're all going to desert me. I'll meet you in Galilee. I thought we shot deserters. I would like you to notice I didn't write that. All of you will desert me. I will go before you to Galilee. When he raises from the dead, he tells the angels, tell Mary and Martha, hey, run and tell the disciples that he's gone on to Galilee ahead of them. He'll meet them there. All had deserted him. Peter answered, though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you, Peter, will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. It's not just Peter saying this, they're all saying it. I'm not going to fall, I'm not going to fall, I'm not going to fall. But Jesus knew all that would betray him, and they knew that they would desert and they would deny. He knew it because it was prophesied. It was written in the scriptures. He just quoted it. You'll strike the shepherd, and all of the sheep will be scattered. So consider this for a moment. Some would say, well, since it's written, they had to desert him, not their fault. No. You look at prophecy, and either the prophet writes it down, and then we all have to dance to the tune, or the prophet was given a glimpse into the future of what we're doing, and he wrote down what we do, and he's dancing to our tune. It's that one. The prophet looked into the future and saw every one of them desert him, and then he wrote it down. They didn't have to desert him. It was just prophesied that they would. Matthew 26:36. And then Jesus went to the place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little further, he fell on his face. He fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Remember, we're asking the question, how does Jesus do this thing in verse 2? Because it's going to be required of us to do that as well. How does he do it? Well, I'd like you to notice. He says, "Could you not watch and pray 1 hour? Pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing." What was their problem? Why did they desert? The flesh was weak. Every one of them said, "No matter what, I'm not going to leave you." But when the moment came, their feet were running before their brain had a chance to think. The spirit was going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa," and the feet were still moving. Again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. Are your eyes heavy right now? So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, and let us go. See, my betrayer is at hand." I'd like you to notice a couple of keys here. In this little section right here is where we're going to see the key of how we can stand for him in front of a great cloud of witnesses and all the angelic host and all of the demons of hell as we are tested, and we are going to be able to stand there exactly like Jesus did, and the starry host will roar and go, "Go in!" And the damned will hang their head in shame and say, we couldn't block that one. Jesus scored again with another one of his children. First, they keep falling asleep, and he says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I want you to hang on to that, because it's going to be a huge key. I would also like you to notice this. This description here isn't like verse chapter 2, where Jesus goes, "In 2 days I'm going to be crucified." Here, he falls on his face. He sweats a drop of blood. He's so sorrowful, he says, unto death. This is a great struggle that Jesus is in. Mark chapter 14, verses 33 through 34 says it like this. "And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, 'My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here.'" Does it sound like he's nonchalantly facing this? Not at all. Luke 22:44 says this. "And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground." That word agony, that Greek word, is only used one time in the New Testament. It's right here. And this is a secret. And this is the other key. It's a word of combat. It's a word of wrestling. It's a word of great struggle. He says, "My soul is in combat right now. And it's a wrestling match that I'm struggling with all of my might, to the point that sweat is dropping like drops of blood. And I feel like I'm going to die." That's how strong this struggle is. Who is he struggling with? Is he struggling with God? "God, your will be done." Not at all. Is he struggling with Satan? I don't think so. Not after being in the desert for 40 days with no food, and it wasn't a struggle there. He just, with the Word of God, threw Satan behind him. Who is he struggling with? Get this. Adrian Rogers says this, and I agree with him. He's struggling with his own humanity. Not fallen humanity, just his humanity. He's not like us. He doesn't have a sinful nature. His heart is not deceptively wicked like ours is. He does not have the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. He has none of that, but he still has a human body, and inside of every one of us is built in a very strong instinct for survival and the dodging of any pain. And he's got to corral that. My feet want to run. The instinct that is built inside. Why do you think it's such a struggle for you to stand in the day when you're accused? Because inside of you, now you not only have the flesh, but you have the fallen flesh, but then you have pride of life and lust of the flesh and so forth. But you have this huge instinct to survive. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, very famous verse you all know. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our, what's the word? Weakness. The Spirit is willing, Peter. The Spirit is willing, Thomas. But the flesh is weak. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness. You know why? Because he was in the garden wrestling with his humanity. But one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. There's the contrast with verse 2 between this nonchalant, I'm going to go die, and now that it's here in the garden, the wrestling. So what does this example tell us? When he says their spirit is willing, but their flesh is weak, and he says to them, what do you do about that? Watch and pray. See, verse 2, when he makes this statement of verse 2, now this is going to be very acute. This may be hard to get. I'm going to try to explain it like this. For Jesus, every day of his life, Patrick always says, I'm one day closer to retirement. Jesus always said, I am one day closer to returning to where I'm supposed to be. He constantly was looking forward and going, I just got to finish this gig here, and then I can go back to my glory. Father, restore my glory that I had in heaven, he says in John chapter 17. His mentality every day of his life was, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. What he's saying in the watch and pray, look at this. He brings Peter and James and John, and he says, you guys stay here, watch and pray while I'm gone. And he goes away. And what are they supposed to be watching for? His return. And that's where you live right now. If you will order your life the way that Jesus ordered his life, and order your life to this truth, nothing here matters. All that matters is he's coming. And I'm just stuck here until he gets here. Watch. See, what he's saying is, Jesus is saying the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Why? Because your eyes are on this planet and living here as long as you can in the greatest comfort. And you need to watch. You need to lift your eyes up and be looking for me, because when I come, I'm taking you out of this place and ushering you into your home. The place you were always meant to be. That's why this is just a tabernacle, just a tent. It's not permanent. Watch and pray. If you want to stand against temptation, and if you want to stand against trials and persecution, the first thing you have to do is have this daily attitude. The daily attitude, well, I'm still here. I guess you have something for me to do. I guess I'll do it. But tomorrow, can I go? Are you coming tomorrow, Lord? I'm so tired of the organ harvesting of the weakest and the poorest coming through Death Mountain towards the borders. I'm so tired of 5 and 6-year-olds being sold as sex slaves across the planet. Why do you want to stay here in a place like that? It's not even about me leaving this place. Jesus, will you come and put an end to it, that it never happens again? Watch and pray is the secret. And that still leaves us with this struggle of Gethsemane. Now, I've got verse 2. Does everybody have verse 2 now, his attitude? Do you have it? Do you understand it? I guess is what I should ask. Somebody nod. Do you understand it? So death is not something then to be feared. It's one day closer to retirement. Now this wrestling with Gethsemane. Let's continue the story, verse 47 through 56. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. There's no Roman soldiers here at this point. These are the temple guards, the soldiers that Israel has it's like their police force. Rome has the army, Israel has a police force. It says, now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, the one I kiss is the man, seize him. And he came up to Jesus at once and said, greetings, Rabbi. And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, friend, do what you came to do. And then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so? At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. And then all the disciples left him and fled. Now Judas comes up with pretended friendship. A kiss. Oh, I love Jesus. Or as Don Imus would say, oh, I love the baby Jesus as he broke every one of Christ's moral laws. I love Jesus. Pretended friendship. Pretended love. Pretended devotions, and may I just go ahead and put this out there. Pretend pastors. Not really shepherds of the flock, but thieves and robbers, wolves in sheep's clothing, all pretending. The Bible tells us to beware of them. I'm not being harsh. I'm telling you they're out there. Beware of them. The story continues, verse 57. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. Now notice closely. Remember, we're looking for the keys of how we can stand in the day. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Peter gets a bad rap because he denied Jesus. Oh, Peter denied him, the other ones didn't. Well, here's how the story actually goes. Judas gives him the kiss. Jesus turns himself over to them. The 12, or the 11, take off running. Peter and John too. And do you guys remember the movie Forrest Gump? He's in Vietnam and they get ambushed, and Forrest is, run, Forrest, and he's just running. And all of a sudden he stops and remembers, oh, I left them behind, and Forrest turns and run back. That's what Peter and John did. He gets a bad rap. The others just kept going. But Peter gets, I don't know how far away, and he goes, whoa! I can't leave him. He said he's going to die. It says he goes in, actually inside the lion's den. He and John's a friend with the lions. Peter's not. John gets Peter inside the lion den, and it says that Peter is going to sit there to watch the end. Not such a bad guy after all. In fact, again, spoiler alert, Peter denies Jesus, but he's the only one out of all of them that's asked the question. John doesn't face the question. Thomas doesn't face the question. Nathaniel doesn't face the question. Simon the Zealot, the warrior among them, he doesn't face the question. Only Peter is confronted with, "You're one of his disciples, right?" He's the only one that faces the question. Don't give him a bad rap, guys. Verse 59. Now the chief priest and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus. Who has your Bible open right now to this passage? Gay, get ready to read verse 67, okay? When I stop at 66, you just read real loud verse 67. Now the chief priest and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death, but they found none. Though many false witnesses came forward, at last two came forward. This sounds like one of our Senate congressional meetings where they're like, you know what? Yes, I see. Ruth is going, it sure does. We've got all of this evidence, but we can never convict anybody, right? And at least two came forward and said, "This man said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days." Even that's their accounts vary, so they can't even convict him there. And meanwhile, he's standing before this court. He says nothing. He doesn't even try to defend himself, and he doesn't have an attorney there. He's just standing there while they're spewing nonsense. And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it these men testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent. And the priest said to him, now here it comes. Here's the moment. Here's the moment. Here's the trial. "I adjure you, or I command you, by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And right here, all Jesus had to do was say, "I'm just a prophet." They have adjured him, commanded him to speak under oath before the living God, and Jesus said the same thing he said to Judas. "You've said so." What he's saying is, what you said, that's the truth. "But I tell you," if he'd have stopped there, but no, he doesn't stop. "But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man like Daniel saw him, seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds." And then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witness do we need? You have now heard this blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Saying, "Prophesy to us, you are Christ. Who is it that struck you?" I had you read that because I skipped that verse in my notes. I didn't have it here. So. Let's pick up in verse 69 and we'll conclude today. And remember, we're still looking for the secret of how we can stand. Get ready, because it's coming. "And now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard." Here we go. He's the only one out there. He was the only one to get out of the boat, and he's the only one in the courtyard. "And a servant girl came up to him and said, 'You also with Jesus of the Galilean.' But he denied it before them all, saying, 'I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about.' And when he went out to the entrance, let me get up from here and go over here. When he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, 'This man was with Jesus of Nazareth.' What will you say? This man, Mitch, when he was coaching, he was always talking about Jesus of Nazareth. This girl, Rachel, has always confessed Jesus as her Lord. What will you say? No, I didn't. And then he says, I do not know the man. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you. Can I ask you a question? Do you have a Jesus accent? Have you got one? Do you have the Jesus speech pattern? And then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear. Basically what he says, may God strike me dead and my soul rot in hell if I know him. And immediately the rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. All either betrayed or deserted. None of them stood. Peter is asked the question. You may be asked that question. Peter fails in the trial where Jesus succeeded. Do you see that? They're in the same place. Jesus succeeds. You have said so. Peter fails. Peter is set free. Jesus is convicted. Peter weeps bitterly at his success in being set free because it's a failure in what really matters, faithfulness. So I see 2 things here that I want to share with you that will help you to stand in that day. I think they are vitally important. Listen closely. If you didn't hear anything else, listen to this. First of all, verse 2, watch and pray. To have that attitude of Jesus, this world's not my home. And in fact, more than likely, I'm going to be arrested for being a Christian someday. If you just already have that in your mindset, and then I get killed and I go to heaven, you'll be all right. We're in the same place. He left them. He went away. He's coming back. It was just a little while. He walked away, and he comes back and goes, are you guys sleeping? If he came home right now, if he came right now to get us, are you sleeping in your walk with God? Are you just coasting? Are you just taking the easiest path? Are you just saying, I'm just trying to get along in the world? Right now, if he came back right now, in your walk with him, are you sleeping? Wake up. The second thing comes from Jesus' words in Luke 9:23. And he said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and daily follow me. Let's say that, Mike Tyson is getting ready to fight somebody. Who's he fighting, Mitch? Do you remember? Jake Paul. So Tyson's 60 and Jake Paul is what, 30? Yeah. Tyson's not waiting to get into the ring to start sparring. He's already sparring. You don't wait until the day you're arrested to start working on your testimony. You don't wait until you enter into the contest to start building up some muscle mass and some endurance. It's coming. It's coming. You start now. How do I do that? He says you pick up your cross daily. Listen, you're already failing many times. Well, you know what? I know that today is church, but I'm kind of tired, a little sleepy. I'm going to stay home today. You just failed. Every decision that you make right now is a little cross for you to pick up. And they're going to get bigger, and they're going to get bigger. Well, I know the boss says I'm going to get fired if I don't work on Wednesdays, but God has told me I'm supposed to do this ministry on Wednesdays. Now here's a little bit bigger cross. I guess I'm just going to lose my job and trust in Christ. If you don't do that now, you're sure not going to do it when they've got the gun to your head. Right now, every decision. Well, I know that the Lord spoke to me through the Scriptures, and He said to me that I'm supposed to faithfully be giving a portion of my income in worship of Him, but it's going to make things kind of tight this month, so I'm just going to not do it this month. You just now failed. I know I'm not supposed to date an unbeliever. I know that I can only date a believer. I know that, but this guy is cute. You just now denied Him, deserted Him. You notice I said all of them deserted Him, but He said, I'll meet you in Galilee, and all of us had a great hope. Oh, well, they failed, and it was okay. They failed before the baptism of the Holy Spirit came upon them. According to the Scriptures, you have everything that you need for godliness and for life. You have been given everything that you need to stand on that day. The only thing you're missing is a little bit of exercise. Yeah, that show's got some curse words in it, but I heard that it's got a really good scene later. You just fail. You start right now. He's not my teacher. He's my sovereign king. Whatever He says, that's what I do. On tomorrow, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever He says, that's what I'm going to do. And you start with the little things, and you have your eyes towards heaven and watching and waiting, and they won't be able to get a hold of you on that day. You'll already be gone while your body is here. You'll already be taken care of. Friends, unfortunately, we grew up in an American church that did not require anything difficult of us. And so we are snowflakes. Start exercising today. And I'll tell you something else you find. You won't be weeping bitterly when you fail. You'll be walking right next to the victorious Jesus, and He'll be saying, man, you did it. You did it. Well done.